Welcome everyone to our rescheduled Coincidental Feminist Women's Panel. It was originally scheduled for March, which is National Women's History Month. Luckily, we have the internet now, and we can hold it virtually. This panel is in conjunction with our exhibit, The Coincidental Feminists, The Women's Portrait Project by Suzanne Paddock. She is one of our panelists today. Her exhibit features portraits that embody inner beauty and strength of the women that they are portrayed. You can see her exhibit right now on our website, and it will run through the end of the month. I am Meg Weston, Assistant Curator at Riverviews Artspace, and I'm the moderator this evening. With me, I have Charese Chambers, bookkeeper. I have Michelline Hall, photographer and co-founder at BLACKWATER Branding. Amanda Mans, independent publisher and co-founder of Creature Publishing. Suzanne Paddock, who is our exhibiting artist. And Kim Soerenson, the executive director at Riverviews Artspace. Thank you all for being willing to participate. I just have a few questions to lead the discussion. Hopefully conversations between you all will expand past them. And the purpose here is just to share your experience and your opinions, and hopefully have a relatable conversation or bring some perspective to our audience. We can get started. My first question is, many of you, if not all of you, have been or are entrepreneurs in some way or another. Could you share your experience with building this career or business? And do you believe your sex or gender may have made it harder, easier, or did not affect it on building your careers? Raise your hand whenever you're willing to speak. Kim.
So I'll break the ice here.
Can you repeat?
As you know, I'm also, I've been an entrepreneur all my life. I had one company that I sold successfully after 12 years called Omniterum. It was an international company that dealt in vintage and antique world globes, working mostly with museums and institutions, but also high-end collectors. So what I found really interesting in this field is this was not intentional. It is a male-dominant field, but my website and my name, website never featured my photo, and the name Kim in Europe is a male name. Now, I never even thought of that, but that this could be an issue. But some of my longtime clients were really surprised in emails if at some point it came out that I was female. It caught them by surprise, which then in exchange surprised me. So once the New York Times had an article about me, I had a pretty strong response by several of my clients, which mostly positive, but I didn't even know it was an issue until they reached out to me or we had that conversation. So I was really surprised.
Suzanne, do you need the question repeated?
Yes, please.
It is, could you share your experience with building your business and career? And do you believe your sex or gender made it harder, easier, or did not have an effect on building said career?
Okay.
Would anyone like to go next?
I'm trying to think of a good answer for you.
Well, you built your business because of that, didn't you? Partially, Amanda?
I did. I mean, I had some background in publishing. I was actually working for a small press that is owned by men. And while they were good bosses, there's definitely the sense that a lot of people at the top of these publishing companies are men. So even though there are also many high-ranking editors that are female, there it's skewed the way any industry is skewed, where there are typically more men in positions of power. So I guess that's my short answer.
Suzanne?
After college, one of my first art jobs, I've had many, many jobs, but a few were actually art related. And one of them was working for a comic book publisher, Archie Comics, in the Merrimack, New York. And at that time, in the mid 90s, early 90s, comic books were definitely, the artists were men. They were almost all men, even in a little one like Archie Comics. And that was very intimidating, because when I was young, I wanted to be an illustrator. I wanted to be a comic book artist specifically. And I didn't really understand that that there was a problem as far as whether you were a man or a woman, until I was actually working for that company. And I met some people who worked at Marvel, and I met other people in the industry. So it wasn't necessarily that particular company, but the culture, and even just the culture of publishing and freelancing, and it was very cutthroat. But one of the bigger issues was it was very male dominated, and it really was like, I could maybe color, I could do lettering, but computers were starting, so actually letterers were losing their jobs. But nobody really thought that I could be drawing. One of the main reasons, I think, at that time especially, was because men like to draw women in comic books a very certain way, and women wouldn't necessarily do that. Women would draw women more realistically. So it was very interesting to experience that, and to experience it, and understand that was real, and it wasn't, that it surprised me. I mean, obviously very naive. I was, young and in my 20s, but it really surprised me that that it was a real wall. I mean, because I'm especially back then. I mean, I was an excellent draftsman. I could draw better than, there was maybe one other artist there, and thankfully he went on and he did really well. But I mean, I could draw better than most of the artists there. And then there were a lot of them that were older, because that particular company was from the 50s, so a lot of the artists were older anyway, and they were retiring. But I was always looked over because I was female. And it was very eye-opening. And I was also expected to make coffee, which I did once, and I made jet fuel, and I did it on purpose. And then they never asked me to do that again.
No.
So that's and I drank it.
Yeah.
So, but it was interesting. Yeah.
Charese or Michelline, do you have anything to add to the question?
I think from my perspective, I think photography is pretty cool. Like photography, what I've noticed is photography is pretty open to people, even maybe from its inception, since it's pretty much a late 19th or really 20th century type of medium. And so I think from the popularity when people were working, even in the 20s and the 30s, let's say, you've always had lots of gender equality necessarily out shooting. I think like with publishing in every industry, publishing still seems to be very male dominated, so your editors are probably still be more male than female. Also, there also is a perception of kind of like niche things. Like, I remember doing commercial photography, and I say that And like, people always assume that I just take pictures of weddings and children or puppies or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, yeah, I can do all those things too, but they don't immediately think commercial. They don't immediately think, anything business, more business, more industry wise. And so I do feel like there's a level of implicit bias even inside of, from, I guess, a photography's point of view. When it comes to Blackwater branding, I will say that Joanza and I, my husband, we kind of like tag team who goes to like sit down and meet with each client depending on kind of like the indicators of who they would feel more comfortable talking to and being around. And I do know that there are some clients that we would not have if it were not for my husband, and vice versa. That there are some clients that we would not have if I wasn't maybe the go-to person for them. So I do really do see where gender does still have a place, and it shouldn't matter because we're all doing the same work, right? So I guess it really shouldn't matter at all. But I guess you're dealing with people and who they want to do business with or who they feel comfortable with, and so that definitely that gender thing still is a factor even in 2020.
Depends on the culture, I think, too. What culture the person that you're engaging with is from. If I had one of my clients who had a real issue with it was from Greece, which is, still a pretty macho culture in a way, in a sense, he had the biggest issue with it, while nobody from the northern Scandinavian countries did, for example.
Charese, do you have an answer?
Actually, my very first mentor was a man. He was my teacher, and I find because bookkeeping is very similar to like administrative work to some extent, just add the numbers. Administrative work is a woman's dominated kind of field. So I saw a lot of other administrative people as women, but my first mentor was a male, and he encouraged me to pursue bookkeeping and taxes and things of that nature. So I don't see a bias, but I do see as you get up in the ladder, I find a lot of women stop as bookkeepers or perhaps maybe financial advisors and never become CPAs or maybe the big guns of financials. Now that's a personal opinion. I personally don't want to be a CPA, but it is more male dominated. But everyone's got to get their taxes done. So, I mean, it's a means to an end for everyone.
Absolutely. Well, I will ask the next question. Do you call yourself a feminist? And was there a specific moment that you recognized you were a feminist, or a point where you recognized society needed feminism? I'll repeat it just so that everyone hears it with a delay. Do you call yourself a feminist? Was there a specific moment where you recognized you were a feminist, or a point where you recognized society needed feminism?
These are deep questions. I wasn't this is heavy. I don't know. Look, I don't call myself a feminist. And I struggle with that because I guess maybe the way the society makes a feminist is like, I'm woman, hear me roar, identify me, I want to be seen. But I also like does that mean that I'm not a feminist if I like my husband to open the door for me? Does that make me a feminist if I want my husband to get the car if it's raining outside? Am I not a feminist anymore if I want to stay at home and raise my children? I mean, so it's like, it kind of, I feel like you either have to be an extremist of it to be one, and it doesn't allow space to not like the other parts of being, I say, a woman being soft. I think a woman should be soft. I think we present hard a lot of times, especially as a Black woman. Sometimes I want to be multifaceted. I don't want to be boxed into one. I think having a label sometimes box you into one category. So then if you say something that's contrary to that, then people are like, well, I thought you were fill in the blank. And I don't want to do that either.
So you are multifaceted.
Yeah,
That's right.
To piggyback off of Charese, you know, I was thinking about how, like, ironically, I would categorize myself as a feminist, but we understand that feminism is a spectrum, right? So I'm going to explain to you the style of feminist I am. Like, I'm married, I have a husband, you know what I mean? Like, I guess we're still Judeo-Christian, so there's still a little bit of, I guess, patriarchal traditional things that are just a part of that kind of setup, right? Just to be honest. But like I'm definitely like I feel like whoever should be hired for a job should be whoever is the best person for the job. And it shouldn't matter if they're male or female. I think things like head of household is a bunch of crap. Like a lot of coding and tax brackets and language in our laws are just kind of full of crap, and they actually hurt women. I think that even the way that we rely upon science and doctors, you know, like in our modern society, yet we kind of shun and roll our eyes at like people who go like a more herbal route. But if you think about the people who were going herbal routes, they were probably mostly women, because traditionally women can see more colors, recognize more plants, because we come from a hunting gathering society in antiquity, and so we could see more colors, we recognize plants. We were probably people treating the sick folk all these centuries upon centuries, and then all that just gets dismissed with male dominated doctor, you know, physician style things that kind of happen later in our humanity. And so I really believe in I actually believe in balance. I'm not like so feminist where I want to replace every man in every office with a woman, but I do want to elect as many women as possible, because I do feel like there needs to be levity and balance, and people have a right to bring those perspectives. And I think our society is like 50% women last time I checked. So we should definitely have what's reflected in our society reflected at every level, whether it's in the workplace or in the government or in our nonprofits or wherever we are. I really do feel like, you know, I guess I'm a feminist that pushes for equity in those ways, and that's where I would say I was feminist. I'm not going to go burn my bra though in a circle, and you know, I'm not all free the nipple level feminist, and that's okay, and I'm okay with that. So, but I think it's a spectrum.
Can I piggyback on that? I totally agree with Michelline. I mean, what is feminism? That can have so much different meaning for different people, right? I don't see myself as a feminist, but I've been called a feminist in many different ways, some as a form of endearment and some as, you know, almost a curse word, which I'm just me. Mm-hmm. I'm just, you know, I'm an independent individual who happens to be female, who makes her own decisions and choices. If anybody is a feminist, and this is how I was raised, you know, it was not a matter of this is, and I find it interesting, especially in the US, it's very gender driven, like what boys do, what girls do, down to the color they wear. And I think that's a very interesting subject, or how people are raised. But feminism, what does that really mean? If it's an individual that is independent and takes care of him or herself, then I guess I'm a coincidental feminist, you know. But otherwise, I think my dad was more of a feminist than I was, because when I went to middle school, I didn't want to do home ec because I hate knitting, and I like cooking now, but I hated cooking. So he made sure I could go into wood shop because I liked wood shop, you know. Took it all the way to court because that wasn't back then. So I would say my dad's almost more of a feminist than I am. I just didn't grow up with any guidelines, social guidelines or rules that told me that how I should behave as a female.
Amanda or Suzanne, do you have a response?
So I definitely would consider myself a feminist. Creature Publishing publishes feminist horror specifically. So we make it a point to publish women and to publish women of color and to try to broaden the historical or traditional category of horror to include the kinds of stories women would tell, not necessarily the kind of stories that men would tell. So we have this one story that we're actually publishing next year that takes the possession narrative, which is typically a very like masculine, the priest has to get rid of the demon for the girl kind of story. And we actually have this author who has created an Aztec goddess possession story, which is not exactly a subversion of Judeo-Christian values so much as it's kind of re-examining what might the possession narrative look like from a feminist perspective and in a different culture. And this is not like the kind of typical story that you would see published in this genre. So I'm really comfortable with the term feminist because I see it as claiming equality for yourself. And I think that a large part of what we're trying to do as a company is get female stories out there. So we want to see stories that have unlikable female characters, that feature strong female leads. So for that reason, I'm quite comfortable with the term feminist.
All right. Suzanne, do you have an answer?
Yes. I didn't hear Amanda completely, I'm sorry, but relative to being a publisher of horror books, this is not quite a connection, but when I was young, I really, really liked science fiction and fantasy novels, and I always looked for the female writers. So I would love to see who you're publishing. I don't often read horror, but that's kind of an aside. But I feel a connection to that. Like, you know, I would prefer the feminine perspective, or the, you know, just a feminine writer, just a different point of view. But as far as labeling myself as a feminist, I never really thought about it, but I have been called a feminist many times as an insult, especially when I was younger. My family was traditional, and I had sisters that didn't have any brothers, and so there were certain expectations, you know, kind of low, you know, get married and have kids, and that was about it. But I think the idea of feminism, though, is a sense of having the opportunity, not necessarily putting on armor and becoming something you're not, but being allowed to have an opportunity to do things that anybody else wants to do. You know, if you have an aptitude for something, it shouldn't matter what your gender is. You should have the opportunity to be able to do it. And so from that point of view, I think, yes, I am a feminist. Actually, I think all of us here are feminists from that point of view, really. And as far as feeling or identifying that way, I definitely had, I definitely realized that, or had an awakening to that when I was in college. That was the first time I was away from home, and I met a lot of different kind of people. I took a lot of history classes, women history classes, women literature classes, all kinds of things, and really got to just learn about a lot of different ideas and a lot of different people. And so I think I connected it to that too, just being able to experience people that are different from me, I don't know, which I like, and I still continue to pursue that, which is a little bit of a tangent, but I guess if I stayed in a traditional non-feminist way of thinking, I wouldn't be looking for those experiences, and I probably wouldn't necessarily be well. I probably would still be an artist, but not pursuing what I create or what I'm doing now.
Right on. That's a broader answer than I expected, so that's great. Question number 3. I'll do the same thing for Suzanne to repeat, since that seemed to work very well. Suzanne's exhibit focuses on powerful individual women and identifying personal beauty over the societal beauty standards. Is there something you do or wear or some attribute that you value but may not fit into a conventional beauty norm? That question is there something you do or wear or have some attribute that you value but may not fit into a conventional beauty norm?
It's a loaded question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My gray hair. I'm sorry. It is a good question. It is a good question. It makes you think. I said my gray hair, which actually is becoming acceptable, but I feel like I earned it. You know, I went through some stuff, and that's when my hair started to turn gray. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm still here. Me and my gray hair. Although I miss my dark hair, I feel like I earned the gray. I don't know. And I like it. It's very shiny.
I don't know if this fits the category. I couldn't tell you if it's acceptable to society just because I don't care. But I've been told that I sit masculine, I walk masculine, and I like bourbon and cigars.
Right on.
So I don't know. I think that would be almost a good question for others, you know, how others view us. Do you know what I mean? Because we may not purposely do something that's not intended to be unfashionable or unfeminine, and somebody else, because it's just part of our personalities, and somebody else may notice it more than we do ourselves. I mean, I have a lot of interests that are male-made, perhaps. Like, I like fast cars. I like, cigars and bourbon. So maybe I don't know. I don't have an answer. I can't answer that. Somebody else would have to answer that for me, because I don't know what the stereotype is.
All right.
I have one. I have come to accept my voluptuousness. I feel like I've been always trying to lose weight forever and ever and ever. I guess that's part of society norm, but then my doctor says I need to lose weight because I'm only 5'3". But I think in this time of quarantine and COVID, sitting back, I want to be fit. I am no longer stuck on I want to look like or be a size. I just want to be able to walk up the Riverview stairs without being out of breath. I want to go into a store and not leave in tears because I can't find anything that fits me. I want to, and I think those are easy requests no matter what size you are. Now, of course I can't go into like maybe some kind of box store for my size. I most definitely need to go to a specific plus size store. But yeah, that's sometimes defeating. Like you're like, you want to go somewhere and you're like, they don't have any. Oh, this is a good example. I went to White and Black Market, and the highest size they go up to is a 12. Well, most definitely not a 12. So it's kind of like I refuse to go into spaces where I'm like, well, maybe I'll find something, when I know good and well I won't. So I need to be intentional what spaces I'm in that accept me for who I am, instead of trying to fit what the norm is.
Can I, Charese is really right about that. That's the one thing. There's society here really has an image that, you know, from marketing to the fashion industry that is being pushed on that, you know, look at the Barbie doll. I mean, come on. If anybody had a chest like that, they'd fall over. But, you know, that is, and that is ingrained, unfortunately, you know, early on, what size you're supposed to be in that. And then maybe feminism is just not caring about that and just being healthy and happy with yourself.
I think
Right,
beauty
'cause,
is
well,
different than
I think Suzanne just said something.
yeah.
Too. Suzanne, could you repeat what you just said?
sorry, I said beauty is different than fashion.
Yes, beauty is different than fashion.
You know, your sense of beauty is different than fashion or what's fashionable, or, you know, very much.
And I have people around me that reinforce that I'm gorgeous and that I'm pretty on a physical level. So that also helps too. So like, I'm the shortest of all my 6 sisters. I am the biggest out of all my sisters. It's just like, sometimes it's too much when you're around pretty people all the time, right? And you're like, I don't want to be the ugly duckling, but I also need to find a space that supports who I am. I mean, me and Kim have conversations. I've done keto. I've done all the things. And what I do, I want to be able to enjoy food because I like it, but I also, again, want to be healthy, so that I'm not winded when I go somewhere. It's like, or I can walk downtown and things of those nature. So it's not like, the ideology of being a size has gone out the window now. And I'm like, I accept myself for who I am, where I'm at. And if I lose 20 pounds, then I lose 20 pounds. And if I don't, then I don't. It's not a big deal.
I think you're
I
gorgeous.
like that philosophy.
Oh, thank you, Kim. Why you try to feed me
It's
cakes and
not.
things?
Michelline or Amanda, do you have a response?
I think my response actually, but before I get to it, I think Charese is gorgeous. Like, she's always like super
Thank
stunning.
you.
Like, Charese is like one of my, I secretly fangirl Charese and like look at her outfits and everything. I'm like, look at her. Her makeup's always on point. I'm like not good at makeup. That's a lot of stuff. I'm just like not. I don't wear heels that often unless they're like wedge heels because I would die. Like, I would fall down and die. So, and I'm okay with that. I think one of the main things that is probably different about me that is that I think about like 7 years ago, I just embraced my natural hair. You know, like I went through like a whole health crisis, and went through chemo, and I had ended up like losing all my hair. And then when it grew back, I just left it natural, you know. So even now, like I have like these cute little twists that I put in myself because of COVID-19, and I need to do something, right? But just like not trying to. I don't feel any pressure to have like sleek flowing locks. Like I have none of that like societal pressure of, you know, this is what beauty is. You know, I'm just like, that's just not who I am. Like my hair, if I want a sleek hair, I'll just straighten it, you know, for a time, like, you know. But I'm not trying to like chemically process my hair to make it behave like somebody else's hair. It's not like that. So I don't know. I just, when I like loved myself, right, then I started to embrace the things that just made me different, even if it wasn't a side. And, you know, that's kind of, nobody wants to talk about how dangerous little things like that can be. You know, like when you go to a business meeting with natural hair, you know, are you less professional because of that? You know, are you going to be perceived the same way? You know, is it better if I had like really long hair that was cut into layers and stuff and I looked, you know, like a certain part? I mean, that's a lot of, you know, how you're perceived, you know, it's still important when you're talking about the world of business and making money, you know, because people want to trust you and trust uh, their investment with you. But I've figured out that like I'm not my hair, you know, and so I'm just gonna rock it out, and I'm gonna let, you know, my intelligence and my portfolio. And, you know, my experiences kind of speak for myself instead of being so worried about, you know, trying to like, I don't know, just be something I'm not. And I don't know. And I might change my mind and like cut all my hair off again. And if I do, that's okay. I might dread it. I don't know what I might do, but I just really feel good about being free to make that choice. And I don't really feel kind of hemmed in from a societal perception of beauty.
Agreed.
Amanda?
To kind of take it a different route, as far as something that I might do that would be considered, I guess you could consider it a little bit more masculine. I am totally willing to ask other people for things. I think that when you ask somebody for something, you kind of have the expectation that they might say yes to you. So in publishing, when me or my business partner needs to make a new contact at a bookstore or reach out to an author we would like, but maybe is bigger than what our company currently is, I think it's important that we be able to ask for that in a confident way. So I think that probably is the closest thing that I have to answer your question. As far as like beauty standards, I guess I do, you can't tell at the moment, but I usually do like to dress more like a tomboy. So I do like oversized t-shirts. I do like my Clark Wallabies quite a lot, which that looks like a more masculine shoe. So I think what you guys have said about embracing those things about your body that you like, that maybe go against beauty standards, or style that goes against current beauty standards, is important.
Interesting take with the asking, because that is something that women may be more perceived as like, well, you know, we'll just let it, whatever they're willing to give us is fine, when being more assertive is a good way to differ yourself from that. I only have one more question, and it is, who are some women who inspired you at any point in your life, either personally or not, and who is someone or some group that you want to inspire? So that questions again are, who are the women who inspired you at any point in your life, whether you knew them personally or not, and who is someone or some group of people you would like to inspire?
I can start.
Sure.
So when I was in graduate school, my thesis advisor, Lucinda Roy, was an incredible influence on me. She has done so much with the opportunities she's been given. She actually founded the MFA program at Virginia Tech. So I definitely have gotten a strong sense of possibility from her, and how you can actually like live out your dreams, I guess. And as far as like women that I would want to inspire, I am like, part of the mission of our company is to encourage women and encourage writers to write stories that have not typically had a publishing house to publish them. So we're trying to broaden the bounds of horror, and we'd like to inspire women writers to like embrace what we're trying to do for them, I guess.
Very good mission to have. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next. Unfortunately, I don't have the answer of an intellectually forward-thinking individual, but for me, it's a very personal. I think I don't really have idols per se. I mean, there's people I do think are amazing, but I don't. For me, it's my grandmother, because she survived World War II by herself with 3 kids in tow. and she did what she had to do to make it happen, you know, to really survive. And she was one heck of a negotiator, and she was one tough cookie. And if I'm anything like her, I'm okay with that. As far as inspiring, I hope I set a great example for my daughter to be independent and to not, yeah, to reach high and have goals, and there's no reason not to reach them. And if anybody else thinks that's cool and wants to go for the ride, that's great too. If I can inspire anyone, that's great. But I would say for me, it's a very personal thing. And my grandmother, as an example, who has survived World War II and did what she had to do to make it. And if it wouldn't have been World War II, she would have probably been an amazing scientist or innovator. But that just wasn't an option for her. And I mean, she lived till she was 100, and as a, you know, through World War II with her 4 kids. And yeah, I hope my daughter is the next generation of us.
Very cool. Charese, Michelline, Suzanne.
Well, I would.
Your question.
I would say women that inspired me.
Could you start over, Suzanne?
I would say women that inspired me. When I was 12, my art teacher. I had an art teacher for 2 years. Elise Korn was her name. She was very inspiring, not only to be creative and to be an artist and embrace my kind of creative, odd way of thinking, but also to be a woman. She was just a really interesting person, very, very inspiring. And my mom, although it was after she passed away, I feel like from her I learned grace, what grace means, and how to be a graceful person. But I didn't learn that until after she was gone. And then as far as inspiring others, I actually don't really see I don't have children. I don't really see myself that way. I wouldn't even, I don't even know how to approach that. I mean, I don't think I'm a bad example of a person. So I guess I, you know, I don't know. I don't really have an answer for that side of it.
Part of being an artist, I think you will inspire people that may not even know it. So I wouldn't rush to think that on that question.
I agree.
That's just from also being an artist and knowing that artists inspire me. So Charese or Michelline, do you have a response?
There's a lot of women in the church I grew up in that inspired me. At the time, now that I'm a grown up, I realized they were bullies. But you know, children need structure. It's okay. It's okay. I think because of who they were in the church, I looked up to them, but now as a grown up looking back, they were bullies, but it's okay. Now as a grown up, you know, I'm just motivated by all the amazing women I get to work with on a day-to-day basis, like Kim and Meg and Suzanne and Michelline, and hopefully Amanda one day. So, you know, there's a lot of dynamic women here in Lynchburg and in the surrounding counties, and you guys all work in your own lane, and we come together when we need to. And any one of you guys are nothing but a phone call away if I feel like if I needed anything. So I'm just surrounded by just a great group of women in general who are paving their own way and taking no names, and I love it. You know, we encourage each other. You know, we don't have to compete with each other. That's also a great space to be in, where people have mutual respect for each other, and you don't feel like you're in competition. Because society would have you believe that we always bicker behind closed doors and we can't get along and women don't like each other. But I see the contrary. That's not the circle of people that I hang out with. So, and that's very encouraging.
I agree.
Um, so I was trying to figure out how to make my answer shorter because I can be very long-winded. I don't know if I've really succeeded at that, but when I think about people who've inspired me, you know, I've been inspired. I feel like man, I'm like a ceramic pot, man. I've been so molded by so many hands, you know, so many influences of so many things and experiences and individuals, and people have just spoken into my life, or given me hope, or even got me told, even like the bullied people that the Charese mentioned. I'm like cracking up, you know, like, I mean, they may not have done it the best way, but I understand, like, in a way, they cared about you, you know, and they wanted the best thing for you, you know. And so I just feel like I've just had such a lifetime, from like aunties and grandmas and my mother, even to people stuff that I read or get to experience, like people like Ella Fitzgerald or Nina Simone, people like Angela Davis, Maya Angelou, Nikki Giovanni, you know, like I'm reading their stuff, I'm looking at them, I'm absorbing, you know, so much of their essence, you know, they're the comet trail that they leave behind. You're like, they're gone, but that their spark is still in the sky, and we can still see it and witness it, and it impacts, you know, it definitely impacts me even now. I think about even, and then even segueing to like our own peer group, you know, I cannot tell you how often I'm inspired by my own peers, like whether it's Meg, you know, or oh my gosh, Christina Ball Davis, uh Ball Davis,
Oh,
ASL.
yes.
You know, that is like, she is like my muse, you know, or someone um you know, like LaShonda, who's not on this call, but like just seeing how she can like stick and move, and her brain works differently than mine, you know. But like, you know, Kim at Riverviews, it's like so many people really have just, I don't know, they've just given me so much, you know, like from whether it's from reading or just experiencing, you know, their own essence in my life. And I see where all of those things have just helped kind of propel me, or impacted me in a way. And I also, now when it comes to like who I want to inspire, you know, I always tell this story about how like I didn't even think I was an artist at all, because I didn't get to do art things, and I got to do this really cool uh, working with clay with May Carter when I was like in the 6th grade, and I made this most awesome looking mask. It was like so phenomenal. It probably wasn't that phenomenal, but it was like the best thing I'd ever made. But I had never worked with clay like that before, where you got to fire it and glaze it and all that fun stuff. And I remember that was the first time that, because of my exposure to something that was atypical, um, it just sparked something in me like, hey, maybe I am a creative person. Maybe I can take the limits off of myself. And I truly try to do that even now. Like, you know, I work with kids at the middle school. I work with kids in different groups. I'm always mentoring or teaching kids at different places. I try to volunteer my time with groups that also give back, and especially exposing kids that would not, um, who wouldn't have the time to be exposed, or wouldn't have the chance to be exposed to cool art education or really fun stuff without us bringing it to them. Like, that is a deep passion of mine, because I felt like that's what was brought to me. And so I have to pay that thing forward. And sometimes I feel like, are these kids even listening? Oh my gosh. And then every now and then, like, somebody will like roll up on me, like out, and be like, oh my gosh, it's Miss Hall. And they hug me, and I'm like, they remember me, you know, so it's really touching. So yeah, I think that that's what I try to do. I hope, like, God help Desire, but she's like 5 now, so I think right now we're like still cool parents, and so she wants to be like us right now. Check me in about 10 years when she's 15 and doesn't want to have anything to do with me. But hopefully, a lot of the, I guess, the good life lessons, and I guess your things like character and tenacity and stuff like that will rub off on her. And just not being afraid to be creative and not being afraid to speak up for yourself. I think women's voices have been um, suppressed for a long time. And so I love that we like live in this era where we can speak up and speak up for ourselves, and it's encouraged. And so I don't take that for granted, and I'm really grateful, that we even can do something like this today. So thank y'all for putting this together.
Well, it's a very good way to sum it all up. Lots of local answers, which is really great. I'm glad that we're all kind of community minded. That's really nice. Even if it's our community of what we are involved in, like your publishing, Amanda, and sticking up for those women, or artists, and even Lynchburg folk and the surrounding county folk. Thank you all, ladies. We had some really great conversations, I think. Lots of different perspectives than I thought. So for me, it was very nice to hear varying levels of things. Yes, Kim?
Just want to say, I think when this group of women, or women in general that we interact with, are all strong women. And one thing we have in common is we help each other. We're a collective of women that work with each other, that, like Michelline said earlier, that support each other and don't, there's this misconception of professionals and of women, female professionals, and of women that we don't support of each other. I would say it's the opposite. I think we are a collective of strong women who understand the importance of being professional and working within that.
Well said. Well, thank you all again for participating. Thank you for anyone who will be watching. Again, Suzanne's show is up on our website, Coincidental Feminists, the Women's Portrait Project, up until the end of June. And a link will be in the description, as well as some of the websites of these ladies and their endeavors. So thank you all.